Guy Malone.
Hi, Paradox Brown.
So, we're here, drinking coffee.
And we're Alien Resistance.
So, that makes this coffee
with Alien Resistance. Episode 1.
So, heard the world was supposed to end.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And it didn't end.
No, didn't.
No, I was really looking forward to that, the world ending.
Yeah, bummer it didn't happen.
I know. We haven't gotten a lot done, really, the last couple of years. It's kind of just like, oh, the world's going to end, so... But it didn't happen, so...
Guess that means we need to get back to work.
Yep. Better get busy. Looks like we got some unknown period of time left to continue warning the world about the alien deception. Better get back to work.
Let's do it. Let's start with a podcast.
Yeah. If we're going to do a podcast, I want to do it relaxed. I want to just talk. I don't want to be hamming it up.
Not really scripted or...
Yeah. I mean, we can have notes, but I don't like that thing where it's like, like do your radio show voice. Do your radio show voice. Do it.
Oh, you mean like, live from Roswell with Guy Malone. On tonight's show, we'll be having Mike Heiser, PhD. Yeah, like I used to kind of over project and...
No, you were great.
Well, thanks.
That was great. That was a great show. But I'm saying though, let's do something different. Let's just have conversations and record them and let people listen to it. So it's not like this show, it's like...
Exactly. I mean, how many times have we been sitting around going, darn, we should have recorded that after we've been talking about something for 20, 30 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. That is the birth of this show right there. The conversations we have. We need to record them, maybe put them out there. That'd be great. But episode 1, people don't know who we are.
I think a lot don't anymore.
Yeah, there's so many new people getting into this subject. It's like, that's interesting. We meet people and they're like, alien resistance, I've never heard of that. And like, you're talking to people, it's like, oh yeah, alien abductions, they're stopped in the name of Jesus. And did you hear about those giants after the flood? And they never Dr. Heiser, never heard of C4 research. It's like, wow.
Yeah, that conference we did 6, 7, 8 years ago that covered all the ins and outs of this, and the follow-up with the symposium, and 3 PhDs and theologians gathered in Roswell. It's like, wow, how quickly people forget.
I know. It's almost like, it's weird. But, okay, so for people who haven't heard of alien resistance, maybe this will help some if they ever find it. But, so, first episode, let's talk about who we are and the history of alien resistance and, like, us. So Guy Malone, who are you? Tell me about yourself.
Well, I had a very rough childhood.
Were you abducted by aliens?
Allegedly, yes. That was what started all this, for me, anyway. That I'm a childhood experiencer of what the world commonly calls and believes is alien abduction. Had these childhood visitations that I kind of half remembered in dreams, and just looking back over my life when the topic of alien abduction started becoming a little more normal in the 80s, late 80s, maybe early 90s.
Normal, you mean like heard of?
Yeah, heard of.
Yeah.
The Whitley Strieber Communion book came out and was #1, and it was the New York Times #1 bestseller. So it was becoming a topic of conversation and being taken more and more credibly.
So was that before you were a Christian then? You kind of realized you were an alien abductor?
Yeah, I didn't grow up as a Christian or in a Christian household per se. I had these experiences that now I reduce the definition of it down to just more standard. I had paranormal experiences with fallen spirits, fallen angels.
And what did you experience? I mean, tell me about an experience you remember from your childhood. Like, how old were you and what do you remember happening?
Probably most of it happened between the ages of 4 years old and 8 years old. For me, I can kind of pin it down remembering what house we lived in. That's how I know how old I was. I had night terrible dreams. Like occasionally there was this one where these giant cats, maybe lions, but giant cats with these huge eyes and claws and teeth, and they were holding me down, trying to eat me or, rip open my guts somehow with their, quote, claws.
I'm sorry.
I was trying to run through my house to get away from them, and I'd run down one hallway, turn a corner, and there was another one. I'd turn back the other way, and I'd run smack into another one, and they were just holding me down.
It felt like realistic. Like, was it feel like a dream, or did it feel like more physical?
Well, I totally believed it happened to me, even though it happened at night, and for most of us, that's the definition of a dream. I remember telling my grandmother, who lived with us then, the next morning about what happened to me last night, and actually feeling really miffed that she's like, well, it was just a bad dream. Don't worry about it.
So you didn't think it was a dream at the time when
No.
it happened next day. And it's like, no answers maybe from Grandma, unfortunately. So that was just, it was a bad dream. You're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can relate to that kind of thing.
Because you've had experiences also.
Yeah, because we're both former abductees. So, yeah, so let me relate one of mine.
I prefer the term experiencers, though, because abductees, I think, is actually a misnomer.
Well, of course it is. I totally agree. But experiencers is just not in the dictionary yet. So, but I understand. We use it all over the place.
So what was going on with you when you were young?
Well, it's just that reminds me of the experience I had where I thought I saw a gray when I was 5. And I remember talking to my mom afterwards.
Like an alien gray?
Yeah, in the house during the daytime. When I was, so I remember I laid down, I was taking a nap with my mom in their bedroom, a queen-size bed, and I think my little brother was on her other side, and I was on the other side opposite from him, and my mom, she was just taking a nap with us during the day. She's younger than me, and I was about 5, and in their bedroom, the way it was laid out, they had this full-length mirror on the closet door. And so I rolled over in the bed, I could see it, and I could see to where it was like under the bed, see the floor on the side of the bed. And when I looked down there, it looked like there was this head of something that was laying on its stomach and like peering out from under the bed.
Was it looking at you?
It was looking at the mirror and looking at me and reflecting in the mirror. But it was all totally physically real is how it felt. But yeah, it was a typical alien gray. But at first when I saw it, I couldn't. And this is daytime. I mean, it was broad daylight in the bedroom. Light coming in through the window. And it was totally physically real. I was awake and I saw this thing and I couldn't figure out, my brain couldn't process what it was. And I remember thinking, is that a bald man or a kid? Because it was small-ish like a kid, but then it didn't have any hair. And I thought it was kind of like a bald man that had these big eyes. And I just my brain slowly just, okay, it's a monster. That's what it is. It's a monster. That was about the only thing I could relate it to in my mind. Okay, well, it's not a bald man, it's not a kid, it's got these big eyes, and I don't know, it must be a monster. That was the only word I had for it. And
Your mom was asleep?
Yeah, she was
there
asleep
were other
beside
people
me.
In the room?
Yeah, she was asleep beside me. And
I
remember thinking about, like, getting out of the bed or touching it or, something like that, when I touch it. And everything felt totally real. And I saw it and I had this feeling, no. And I just ended up, I got a good look and I rolled over right up next to my mom. And I know this sounds weird, maybe, that I didn't do something else, like start screaming or whatever, but with these experiences, there's a strange element to it where, it's, the paranormal hits reality and sometimes you just don't react how people might think. But with me, it's like, no, I'm just going to cuddle up next to Mom. But I remember thinking, this is real. I remember holding the blankets and going like, okay, this was real. I was cuddled up next to my mom, and I ended up just laying there for a while, and I somehow went back to sleep. And after the nap, when I woke up, I remember my mom came in. She was helping me, like, change clothes or something. And I was talking to her about seeing something, and I was asking her, if there was something under the bed, or they had a Halloween party or costume party of some sort, and I think I was asking her about if there was like a costume thing or what, and she said something about this big teddy bear, and it's like, no, that wasn't it. And the thing is, years later, I talked to my mom about it, and she actually says she remembers me asking her about how I saw something weird once and asking her about it. So, I don't know, but...
Would you have used the term alien then?
No.
Did you ask her about that?
No, but a few years later, it must have been a year and a half later, and went to a movie theater where they were playing E.T. And I don't know, I think it must have been a re-showing, but I'm not sure if it was when it first came out. I don't quite think so, but I saw it at the movie theater, and afterwards I was telling them, I saw E.T. That's what I saw. I saw E.T. And I didn't think twice about the fact that I shouldn't have, just say that or anything. So like that, I saw that. I've seen E.T. and everything, and they didn't really believe that or, get it. But it's like, it wasn't until I saw the movie E.T. that I had a name for what it was besides just, okay, that's some sort of monster. So that is a childhood experience I remember.
That makes me think of a couple other things, a couple similarities between what I experienced. Because first you said people don't react the way you might think they do. It's looking back now, like through theological lenses of visionary experiences and stuff, what we know from the Bible, I feel like sometimes there's a certain type of lethargy involved where the experience is happening to you more than you are interacting. Something is directed at you.
It's shock.
Yeah, it could just be pure shock. There was one of my daytime experiences when I was a child. The way I described it when I wrote about it in a book, Come Sail Away.
And you're the author of a book called Come Sail Away, UFO Phenomenon in the Bible, which was released in 1997 on the internet and 1998 in paperback, relating your experiences.
Yes, you would just happen to know that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would just happen to know that.
Yeah, that's a big part of how it started for me. I did detail autobiographically all of my experiences that I could remember up to the late 90s, and the conclusions that I had when I was younger, the worldview that it impacted me with, knowing what I didn't want to believe. The thing I least wanted to believe in the world was that I'm an alien abductee, and everything that I was learning or reading about the subject at that younger point in my life said that the experience would happen again. The aliens would return. So it wasn't just that I'm living with the experience, it's not just that I'm coping with the reality of accepting I'm an alien abductee. Oh, and that's okay. What I was actually more dealing with that was fearsome to me was knowing that this was going to happen again to me. We haven't gotten into it yet, but there were more horrific experiences as well.
Well, where did you, because you read a lot of books on alien abduction. I guess you picked that up from the literature, that it would happen again as you got older.
The main one I remember at the time was Whitley Strieber's Communion, recounting his experiences. I was college age, a roommate. I still wasn't Christian yet, and a roommate of mine, we used to be kind of new agey. We, party the way college kids do. He brought home the book, Whitley Strieber's Communion, and the cover of the book was the very now classic, artist's rendition of the alien. Kind of more of a tan-skinned, but what people would call now an alien gray.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Oh, yeah, it made me almost jolt or freeze in my tracks.
And a tall gray, I think.
When he brought it into the house, because he wanted to read it. And I was almost like, from some instinctive reaction, do not bring that book in this house. Because I wasn't even a Christian, but he was playing with a Ouija board at one point when we were living and working together. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely put my foot down. Do not bring that Ouija board in this house. You don't know what you're playing with. You don't know what you're inviting. So even though I wasn't a Christian, I had some sort of something.
You believe there were spiritual forces, and just logically, like the Ouija board might bring in who knows what.
Yeah, there was good and bad out there, and us mere mortal humans had no idea of whether they were telling us the truth or tricking us.
You thought that before you were a Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you believe there were spiritual forces or something, because you were into the New Age.
Yeah. I was seeking out spirituality, in fact. Alternate forms of it. I had my bag of rocks in my pocket, different crystals that I could describe to you their properties. I read some of the popular literature, Richard Bach, Illusions, kind of defined my worldview at the time. He's the more popularly known as the author of Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I read that also, but I like Delusions. I was reading Illusions?
No, the Seagull. But
I also read like all of the works of Carlos Castaneda.
I read some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't know that about you. So not a Christian, believed in spirituality, was seeking out spiritual worldviews in general, was not comfortable with that book being in the house, but I didn't draw a line and make a big stink about it as I did the Ouija board. I just wanted him to hurry up and read it and get it out of the house.
But did you, at that time when you saw it, did you know, like, did you still kind of remember something had happened, or?
No, not exactly. I had a very adverse, emotional, and almost like physical, my body jolted type of reaction. But I was not quite to the point of understanding or believing I was an alien abductee.
You know, they call that an abreaction, I believe, where you have a physical, you don't know why exactly, but there's some sort of physical something that happens in reaction to something. An abreaction, it's actually like if you have something happen that maybe you're not aware of, sometimes that'll happen. I mean, that's what secular psychology says, but there's of course other ways to interpret it too. Just to throw that in there.
Oh. Eventually I would read Communion, and immediately, maybe even before I was done with the book, I started having these flashback dreams. And I started remembering pieces of my childhood that I'd not thought of in many years. But I could remember stories I would tell people when I was young, and of course they thought I was a bright, imaginative young child with all of these tales. And they would often involve concepts like either reincarnation or what I would later know in life as New Age spirituality and pirates and travels and leaving my body.
How old were you, like, when you were telling these stories?
First, second grade.
So you were about 7,
6,
8
7.
years old. 7, 8 years old, yeah. So what are some more... Okay, so wait, when you were in your early 20s and college age with Communion, some stuff didn't come to mind. But when you were a kid, you were more aware of the stuff that had happened. So it's almost like...
It was still happening. That was the thing. Like, one of the daytime experiences I was mentioning earlier when we were talking about the lethargy of the experience was, I remember a fairly long conversation I had with a praying mantis in my front yard, who, even though I was like 6 or 7, this praying mantis was larger than I. And it's not like I remember him moving his mouth and speaking to me, but we were there together in sort of in a way frozen, but he was communicating with me. I was almost being downloaded, some sort of teaching, some sort of information. But the lethargy, or the way you wouldn't react the way you would think you would, the way I wrote about it in Come Sail Away exactly was, I knew that I did not like them. By that point, I did not like them in my life. They were creepy, they'd done mean things to me, whatever.
Chasing you around the house at night trying to rip your guts out, kind of.
Yeah,
you wouldn't like
and
them.
There's other sexual elements to it as well. I don't lead with that, but I don't hold back on it when I write about it in the book, or when I'm really giving a long version of the story. But the point is, I believed, now here's the hook, I also knew, even though I didn't like them, what I wrote was, I had just gotten used to them by that point, and I knew that I couldn't get away. I was just stuck there. I was going to, whatever it was, painful or not, informative or not, fun or not, which it never was for me, but point was, I was stuck there, and I was not going to get away, so I would just have to endure the experience.
Just kind of frozen, just kind of overwhelmed, maybe, with the shock. It's just you couldn't think to really do anything else, like run away or any normal sort of, it's just like you're there and just entranced.
I would say captive more than that.
Okay.
If I had thought and wanted to run away, my bet would be that experience had taught me it was pointless.
That's a thought. That's a thought. Well, we can get back to some other experiences if you want to, but like with the praying mantis, this is daytime in your front yard. Like,
right. It wasn't a dream.
It felt physically real.
Yeah. When the being was done with its lesson, I don't remember him dematerializing or beaming up or anything. It just, okay, that's over. I'm going to go back to playing in the front yard by myself again.
So you kind of like, do you remember what you were doing before and after?
More after. There is a continuity of memory. It's not like I had the experience with the mantis and then I woke up. and then went and did something else, it's like, okay, I'm here stuck for half an hour with this creature, hate it. Okay, he's gone now, and yeah, I can actually picture myself on my hands and my knees playing in some gravel when it was done.
Yeah.
Picture...
Okay, so it's like, do you remember beforehand any? Like, were you playing with some gravel and it's like you stand up and, oh, there's a praying mantis here?
Not exactly. The beforehand doesn't stand out.
But somehow you just were seeing the praying mantis and then, like, it's like, hey, I'm done, and then
Went
you,
back
like,
to
look
my
away.
life.
It's like you looked away.
Maybe.
You looked away to get down, play with some gravel or something, and then I guess when you look back, it's just gone.
Yeah, my whatever was making me feel captive, I was no longer captive. I'm sure the entity disappeared, and then I was no longer captive, and then I just went back to... This was just a normal part of my life by then. At age 7 or 8, that's the point I'm making, is that it didn't even stand out enough anymore for me to discern what was going on before or what was going on afterwards. It was seamless. I didn't have to wake up from a dream to break the thing or anything like that by that point. It was a seamless, integrated part of my reality. And when it was done, it was done. I would just go back to doing whatever I was doing. If I'd been shopping at a grocery store, even though nothing that vivid or with that many people around comes to mind.
Yeah, so it's almost like you had been trained by these experiences being forced on you to just kind of react a certain way. Because obviously, from what you're saying, maybe the earliest one, there was a fearful, violent element and you were trying to run away or something, but then you kind of got trained into just accepting its sums you couldn't. Yeah, so there's a heavy level of psychological abuse, wouldn't you say?
Looking back, yeah.
Yeah, and then you believe these are...
Now I believe they're fallen angels. I used to believe they were aliens active in my life and would be coming for me again one day. I would look for... Again, what I wrote in Come Sail Away was at that young point in my life, 1920, I'm thinking to myself, well, one day I'll be married, or at least I want to be married, and should I be honest and forthright with this person about my experiences and my possible future? This person whom I claim to love, and let her know that I'll probably be inviting her into my life, into that life and into that experience? Or do I keep it a secret for more selfish reasons because, hey, I had some experience with this. I told 2 different, short-term girlfriends about my experiences. They dumped me because I was crazy.
Well, they just didn't appreciate you well enough.
Well, thank you. Well. But the struggle, that I went through, and I've talked to others who thought almost these exact same thoughts as well, was, do I keep my mouth shut and keep it to myself for the sake of trying to live a normal life? Or do I tell people and risk rejection? I'd gone 0-2 on the rejection route already. And at some point later in my life, once I'd accepted and worked out all this stuff, or belief system anyway, that yes, this is my life experience, I had pretty much defaulted to keep my mouth shut. I can't share this with anybody. But that changed. And I did come out eventually. And, well, it just turns out God had a plan after all.
I guess so.
Yeah. Set me up with another Christian abductee, or former abductee.
Yeah. Yeah.
God's good.
Yeah, who also is doing research and teaching on the topic. And so we both do it. So, yeah, he has a great plan. Whoever you are, and whatever you've been through, But, yeah, I totally get that, being in your 20s. And, I mean, that's really, I know, I bet there's a lot of people out there that can relate to that. Being in your 20s and having this kind of background and looking for someone and trying to find someone who would relate and feeling like you can't really be open because of it. People might think you're crazy or you might bring them into it or something. Yeah.
Yeah, how could I do that to someone I loved if I really loved them? The struggle back then was maybe I shouldn't ever be married because I don't want to bring all this torment and all this torture that's happened in my life onto someone else because of relationship with me.
And thank Jesus, it doesn't have to
praise
continue.
God. Actually, the lesson I learned in all of it was there's nothing to fear but fear itself. The paralyzing fear of being open and talking about it was what was really holding me back from growing and moving into what God really had planned for me. It was years after I was a Christian that I finally began to speak of it publicly anyway and enter into a field of ministry. But we're getting into a lot more of the detail questions, the mechanics of the experience, than I think I usually get to with most interviewers, because in a way they don't really know what to ask, I think, because this is new to them, but I know why you're doing it.
Yeah, I guess I kind of get more into the mechanics questions.
With your own research and your own book on this topic and writing on the abilities of fallen angels as it compares to studying the secular modern alien abduction reports, right?
Yeah. The book I have, a lecture from the Christian Symposium on Aliens 2009.
In Roswell.
Yeah. What's the title? The Bible, Physics, and the Abilities of Fallen Angels, the Alien Abduction Phenomenon. And we go through scripture and compare the abilities of fallen angels to alien abduction reports, and then get in physics of it.
Well, how do they?
Physics, how it would fit in, supposedly. So
that's a very keyword-friendly book title for Amazon searchers.
Yeah, I wonder whose idea that was.
Oh, really?
Malone. Yeah.
Oh, maybe, yeah. You've got a better memory for these things. Okay, so what, in brief, does your book bring out? What is the comparison between alien abduction experiences and visions in the Bible?
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is I would say, about my experiences, about your experiences. A lot of it was visions, and that's the thing, the Bible's full of experiences with angels where people have visions or people have dreams. And it's like, just like a dream is a thing, and everybody knows what a dream is. So you say, I had a dream, everybody has a reference. But a vision in the Bible is something that feels physically real. You usually would perceive yourself as being in your body with all of your physical senses seeming to work, and they're real-time experiences that feel like actual reality, but they're spiritual experiences. And so a vision in the Bible, visions are mentioned many times. A lot of people think of it, well, it's like this almost telepathic projection in your head, like if you're imagining something, you're kind of seeing it in your head, people think, oh, well, that's what a vision's like. No. Whenever the Bible's using that word vision and describing interactions with angels, what people are having is something that's a lot more, pretty much indistinguishable from physical reality. But the prophets in the Bible, you see it a lot, but they know it's a vision. They know it's a spiritual experience. I think in the modern times, it's like we've lost that understanding that people in biblical times had, which is that angels cause visions. Visions feel real. Like, even Peter on the rooftop, when he went into a trance and he saw the sheet lifted down with all the animals on it. I mean,
God told him to eat.
Yeah, so he heard a voice. He saw something with his eyes. It was something that was rather non-realistic, but yet from everything I can see biblical precedent-wise in the description there, what he saw, he was perceiving that he saw it with his eyes, that it seemed physically real, this huge sheet coming down with all these animals. So, I mean, right out of the ordinary, right there, he knew about visions, and they were spiritual experiences, but they seemed physically real. But it was so out of the ordinary, he knew, okay, this is a spiritual vision kind of thing going on. But he was in a trance on the rooftop. But yeah, he heard a voice audibly speak to him. He spoke and interacted back.
That's what I was getting.
Perceiving himself in his body, using his mouth, using his vocal cords in this spiritual experience. But it says he was in a trance. So it's like there's a vision right there. And so, I mean, that's what I would say. All of this is with the praying mantis and the other thing, and what I saw was a gray. That, it's not that a fallen angel looks like a gray. It's that there's more like there's a fallen angel there that's causing you to have a vision of an experience, and they can make you have a vision of pretty much whatever it is they want you to see, whatever they have the legal grounds to do. So
of a gray, of a UFO.
That seems physically real to your senses.
Underground base or a off-world planet that you feel you're on.
Yeah.
That's
anything.
I know you use
just about anything.
I know you use other examples in your writing of my beef with I don't like it when people say it was just a vision, as if it's just a dream. What I see in the Bible is that they are recording events that actually happened to them. A spiritual event. Yeah.
It's
reality, but a slightly different reality.
Well, I agree.
Would you say that, well, here's a question. Would you say that reality is actually transformed around them by the angel, fallen or not, or that their senses are somehow attacked or
hacked
altered.
into. I think that how they do it. I mean, because when it talks about visions in the Bible, it also says like taken up or carried away in the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's like we have a body, and then we have a soul, and then we have a spirit. And so the soul is thought to be, well, the mind and the will and the emotions are part of the soul. So I think what they're doing is they're kind of hacking in maybe to the brain with the, the brain waves and everything as extra dimensional. Angels being like extra dimensional, they are just altering the physical reality directly of your brain waves, of all of that, to where somehow your soul, not your brain exactly, but your soul and your spirit are getting like a false signal of what seems to be physically real, but it's not. It's like they're blocking out some or all of the signal your soul's receiving from
your
the
senses
brain of actual physical reality, and they're replacing it with a false signal. And we've talked with Joe Jordan about this. I mean, he and I both agree that the Matrix scene, where Neo has been taken out of the Matrix, but he gets plugged back into like training programs and everything, that's a good analogy for it. So he's there in the chair, but he's perceiving himself in this training program, and it seems physically real, but it's not. So that's what I'm saying. They're messing with the brain to where your soul and your spirit receive a false perception. So it's a spiritual experience where the spirit is receiving something false through how fallen angels are messing with the physical happenings in the brain with electrochemical signals and all of that. That's kind of how I think it's done. But I also think that they can manipulate physical reality too.
But by the time the vision experience is over, by the time the Matrix training program is over, he has the memory and the knowledge and the experience of what happened, and he carries that with him into his ability, into his memory in the future.
Yeah.
It's like when I read any account in the Bible of a vision of Isaiah being before the throne of God, or of the entire book of John's Revelation, of the apocalypse from the Isle of Patmos. I'm not going to say, meet those guys in heaven one day and go, well, John, that didn't really happen to you. It was just a vision.
Yeah. I mean,
it was just a dream. That didn't really happen. And that's, I think, where it's hard to do this sometimes as a ministry, talking to people, is that in no way, shape, or form would we ever say, well, this didn't really happen to you, because it did happen to them.
And it's happened to us. And multiple times with each of us. We know what it's like because we've been through it, and when we say vision, we are not negating the experience. And sometimes I don't know if people quite catch that, but
no.
This show is,
You're never going to be able to talk to an alien abductee and tell them it didn't really happen to them.
No.
One, you're theologically correct if you do.
Incorrect.
You're theologically incorrect if you do.
Because it really happened to them in the same way the spiritual visions in the Bible that are recorded really did happen to them.
And I know you've written about how John tasted a scroll and it was bitter to his stomach. So even in the visionary experience, the five senses are still active. They have a memory of it, and they can describe it in great detail afterwards.
Yeah, that's just one of many examples that are covered in the book.
Because it really happened.
That one's interesting because it's internal and external. It shows that the vision can actually interact internally into the bodily senses as well. You got an upset stomach, you got something sweet in your mouth. So, it's not just what you're seeing over there or what you're hearing coming from over there. It's something that's right up and totally every sense inside and out can be interacted with. So, are we on a tangent, or are we going?
We are. Somewhere? This is kind of a getting to know you episode.
That's right.
So we live.
So, wait. So I know where I want to go with this. Okay, so you're a childhood experiencer and had some childhood things. So we're talking in your 20s, and you were keeping it to yourself, but then you became a Christian.
Against all odds.
Against all odds. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. And so what happened where now you are... So tell me, in ministry, Christian ministry, it's like, how'd you get into this ministry, and what's your background? Guy Malone of Alien Resistance.
I grew up mostly in Nashville, Tennessee. And
so you're from here?
I'm from here. Yes, I am from around here. Yes, I can get there from here.
Sorry.
And almost immediately upon becoming a Christian, I was in a small church that, emphasized deliverance ministry and the reality of the demonic or dark realm or whatever. At least it was spoken of. It wasn't hidden away. It wasn't a taboo topic. And I'd seen one or two deliverances where people actually had demons cast out of them, like within the first month or two of being a Christian. That might be odd to some people, or that might be different from other people's experiences. But I just snapped by revelation of God. It's like, oh, well, these weren't really aliens that were messing with me my whole life. These were like demonic fallen angel experiences. Parallels in the Bible of what demons and fallen angels did. And another thing we didn't really speak of, just barely, I had this whole crazy New Age worldview that kind of defined me as a result of these experiences. I had ideas that there was no internet for me to get this stuff from. I wasn't studying a lot of stuff in libraries and book reading, at least not when I was in elementary school.
But you had ideas on reincarnation and things like that without any exposure through books or other
television
things?
Or anything.
So where did it come from?
I think from my experiences and interactions with these entities. It was just sort of, in some ways, subliminally downloaded, or, my perceptions, my predispositions. I was like a little freaking New Age guru by the time I was in 5th grade, and I really can't tell you where I got these wild ideas that some people will remember me for. Someone contacted me on Facebook a long time ago, and she and I talked about all the crazy stuff. Like, we threw a Frisbee up on top of my roof once, and I held hands with her, and I said, we are going to think it down off of the roof via mental telepathy.
Wow.
I called in a radio show when I was like 9. There was a submarine that had submerged with sailors in it or something like that. The submarine broke somehow. They couldn't get it to go. And I actually went on a AM radio program in Nashville. I called in, they answered the phone, they let me on. Oh, here's a kid with an idea. They were wanting to know what solutions. And I just asked for everyone in the sound of my voice to think them up. Let's see if we can raise the ship right now. Through all of us hearing this on the radio right now, think them up off the ground and get them to safety. I'm 9 years old.
Wow.
The radio host was, yeah.
Wow. So, that's it.
And I became a Christian one day against all odds.
Yeah, so when did it go from not wanting to talk about this and keep it quiet to when you actually started talking about it?
Well, I wasn't talking about aliens throughout my teenage years, or I was just...
like after you became a Christian.
I talked a lot about different forms of spirituality. That took about 6 years, honestly. I was convinced that I was free and delivered and that these experiences couldn't harm me anymore. The power of Jesus in me was enough to rebuke them and make them go away. I was no longer living with, and I'd seen that happen with other demonic realities in mine and people's lives. So I was convinced that I was free and that I did not have to live in fear of this coming back. Or even if it did, that the power of Jesus Christ in me, I could just rebuke them and things would be good. Things would be okay. But I still had this little fear of a stigma of actually telling people, oh, I was abducted by aliens when I was a kid, or the experience. And I'd always knew that one day I'm going to have to write a book and spell all this out for people. But I didn't want to do it, honestly, until after my parents had died, because I didn't want to embarrass them.
Yeah, I can understand those kind of feelings about things, yeah. So... My
child, the alien abductee, I was a teenage Frankenstein kind of stuff.
Well, when he did come out, though, understanding it was demonic, and you put it that way to people, did you find Christians were generally accepting at all about it?
Not really. Not immediately.
How did that go down?
Especially in the late 90s, and even my experience throughout the decade of the 2000s. What do we call those? The OOs, I guess?
The O's.
Uh-ohs. For the most part, it is for the most part, it is a topic that the mainstream church hasn't wanted to touch. That's changed a little bit since I got into this in 1997.
Well, I think it's changed. I mean, since '97, at least in some circles. I mean, now it's like I think there's a lot more people that are open about their testimonies, at least in certain circles. I mean, you definitely find more on the internet now about it, even like on YouTube talking about it. But I think the whole culture has gotten more of an interest in the paranormal, where it's become more and more mainstream, including this. So, I mean, the culture's really shifted more towards it, like with the reality TV shows now and everything, to where just in general, I think people are more open. But I don't know. The church is more open in some circles, but maybe not everywhere.
What circles might those be?
Yeah.
The ones we created in the last 15 years, maybe?
Yeah, you and certain other people really open that up more for more acceptance. But okay, so what did get you speaking up about, like, 6 years, you said?
Yeah. In 1997, the group known as Heaven's Gate, most will call a UFO cult, committed suicide based on their belief in UFOs and the Bible working together, and somehow that by committing suicide they could enter Heaven's Gate by boarding this UFO that was allegedly passing by the Earth behind a comet. And somehow or other their leader had convinced them that all this theology, the leader was a pastor's son, and he justified all of his beliefs using the Bible somehow, that he and his partner were the reincarnation of Jesus and the Father. And it just struck me as a tragedy that 39 otherwise intelligent people could get sucked into having demonically, I'd say, inspired UFO and the Bible related belief systems enough to actually kill themselves. And I felt a weight of what those people's eternal destiny was going to be, because in a sense I felt that I had the answers that many of them might have been looking for, and I was too scared to go public with why I knew the answers to their questions.
Why you had some authority maybe to speak on it is you'd had some experience with it, so
I got me a webpage and I started writing back in '97.
And the internet was young.
Yeah.
What was there, like, out there in the way of Christian material on this, like, '97?
I couldn't find any except for David Flynn's Watcher's website.
So
in fact, when I began searching, when I first set my fingers to a keyboard and I was online and went to AOL web crawler and typed in the word UFO, the number one match was Dan Geeb's UFO folklore. And it was, for at least a decade, it was the number one match for the search term UFO on the internet. A huge hub of all kinds of links and reports and thoughts and ideas. And right there on page 1, he had 2 scriptures from the Bible that were inferring that what people were finding in the Bible were really UFO reports that ancient people misunderstood because they were a pre-technological society. And I'm like, man, I gotta do something about this. Whatever it was in my head between my experiences, I felt I have the biblical answer that people are looking for, the truth that they need. And I had to commit myself to put it on the internet. And I wrote my first self-published book, Come Sail Away, as a very long webpage that contained both my personal testimonies and all my horrific stories, and a New Testament thesis that this is a huge deception that's going to end with a one-world ruler, an antichrist, and deceive the whole world into believing that aliens are here to save humanity from the end times, from the disasters and all the Matthew 24 and Book of Revelation stuff. And I put it online, and I knew that I couldn't keep quiet about the personal side of it as much as I wanted to. I just had to go ahead and label myself, because some of the earliest feedback I got from people who didn't know what was going to hit them when they read this was they basically got a New Testament tract shoved down their throat where Jesus was the answer, but they came into it because they were looking for information on UFOs and alien abduction. And I was there telling them my story. And the early feedback I got was, I don't necessarily agree with your opinion, or I don't like where you went with this, but given that I gave them so much intimate and horrific detail, people were like, but I'll say you've definitely got the right to have an opinion, more so than many others, or more so than I do even. And it worked to a large extent. It worked.
So that's awesome. And that was 97. And so I think you've mentioned before you started getting a lot of email. And once you got the site linked through some other sites, is that?
Yeah, I went online and just started going to... I got rejected by every so-called Christian search engine and portal that was out there at the time, and would even kind of get into little email arguments with their webmasters. Just read it. It really is Christian New Testament evangelistic material. But the topic was just, no, we're not linking to anything that says UFO. And that same vibe carried into Roswell a year or so later. But the big link I actually got was from artbell.com in 1997. The famous, well, today it's Coast to Coast, late night paranormal radio show with George Norrie is who people would be familiar with. But 15 years ago, Art Bell was the host of that program, and his webmaster turns out is also a Christian. I sent him the link of my UFOs and the Bible website book online to read for free. They thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread and put it as the top link on their link of the day page. I went from getting 15 or 20 hits on a great day to the first day that was up there, over 600 links that first night.
Wow.
And not a small amount of email either.
I bet not.
A lot of it was argumentative. A little was appreciative.
Did a lot of Christians write you?
Not off the bat, no.
Mm-hmm.
No, mainly it was, I would say it might have been 10%, 5 or 10% Christians were writing me. And they'd say things like, wow, I've always thought this, but I've never seen it spelled out. So clearly, thank you for writing this. That was a great email when it came.
So there were some people that were Christians who had thought about this before, kind of figured it out, but they didn't see anything out there on it.
Right. There was nothing that put into words what some people were beginning to suspect what was true. And there was a lot of, 80 to 90% of the email was just people that wanted to argue with me, and they said I was completely wrong. But those were the UFO and alien enthusiasts, aficionados, and that wanted to believe that they were here to help mankind. They were our saviors. They were beneficial to us. These were the New Agers that were basically yelling at me, and they didn't appreciate me bringing my religion into the serious topic of ufology.
You had been there. I mean, you could understand where they were coming from.
Totally. I didn't really care for Christian arguments myself back in the day.
Well, okay, so you mentioned Roswell. So let's jump to Roswell. How did you end up in Roswell? When did you go to Roswell?
I had spent a good year of my life in sort of full-time ministry, answering these emails back and forth. I'd stay up all night, and I'd get home from work kind of late at night, and I'd wind up staying up all night sometimes, at least 3 or 4 hours, replying to the emails that I was getting, and was spending an increasingly inordinate amount of my time dealing with this website and the traffic and the responses. And I still hadn't even got it printed in hard copy as a book yet. Somehow or other, I got to looking online occasionally at Roswell, New Mexico. Oh, they have a festival there every year, UFO festival. People who want answers and believe in UFOs actually go there every year to hear speakers. And
this was 98. So the internet was still kind of new then and smaller.
Yeah, and it was actually frustrating because for some reason I wanted to learn more about Roswell, but there was so little about Roswell on the internet. There were 3 websites I could find even based in Roswell.
3? Wow.
Yeah.
But now it's probably half the businesses in Roswell have a website. I'm just wanting to point out, it's like for people who are maybe a little younger, that's like don't remember the late 90s and how the internet was then, that it was very different. I mean, that was kind of a pioneering time, going out with your stagecoach, going out west on the internet. Websites were still new and there wasn't as many, and social media hadn't sprung up like it has, and it was very different.
Google didn't exist then.
Yeah. There's people sometimes, you go to like an archive site and just look around at how the internet looked back in the early days. It's a whole different landscape.
Or don't.
It was a pioneering time, yeah.
As I was, well, thank you, that's very complimentary. as I would find myself looking at Roswell on the internet every now and again, I would just realize that I was getting this burden or this idea that I should go there. And do what, though? That's ridiculous, guy. But speeding things up a little bit, I eventually submitted to my cell leader at the time and then the pastor of the church that I was attending that I have this book now in hard copy form, and I'm feeling like God is wanting me to go to Roswell as a missionary to share this with people that go there looking for answers. And of course I thought they would both say, that is ridiculous, guy. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Of course you're not supposed to go to Roswell. That's just ridiculous. 1,500 miles away. And both of them were like, I'm going to pray about that. Get back with you. And they did. And they both felt, though, especially the pastor, Brad, kind of hated to lose me from, I was useful around the church. Back then I did stuff. And he was, I'm going to have to affirm this. He got back a few days later. I think I agree. I believe God actually is calling you to move out there and do this. And I'm like, you were supposed to talk me out of this. You were supposed to be the voice of reason. So, roughly 6 months later, I showed up in Roswell with not much of a plan, just a self-published book. And I arrived in late June or early July. In time for my first UFO festival, which was in 1999, where the convention center sold tables for people who had products to sell, t-shirts, books, glow-in-the-dark alien skin. Much to my surprise, no Christian presence, but lots of New Age people there selling books about versions of spirituality that connected the aliens to the end times as good guys here to save the day. If you will just reject all these ancient religious trappings that are keeping mankind down and follow the aliens as humanity's saviors, and had a table at the Roswell UFO Festival for 3 or 4 days, offering my book for tourists as cheaply as I could make it possible back then.
Wow. And so going to Roswell, I mean, I would think some of the strategy at that point in time was that one of the ways to reach a lot of people, you had to be there in person, maybe, I bet back then it's like you couldn't really reach as many people for sure and get to them without actually going to a physical event. I mean, again, this is kind of an internet has grown and changed on things.
Yeah, part of my research was, before moving, was that it wasn't just Roswell, but it turned out there were these UFO conferences being held in various places around the country. San Antonio, California. And I sort of realized, well, that's a 1,500 or 2,000 mile drive from Nashville. But if I were living in Roswell and say I could somehow afford to get the money to go to one of these things, it's less than a day trip to most of them.
Awesome. So there was a kind of a plan in mind. It says go to the festival, also go to conferences. You've been to a lot of UFO conferences over the years.
Yeah, they're held from coast to coast. Hollywood to Washington, D.C., Arkansas, Colorado, San Antonio, Florida. There are UFO conferences that are, some are more serious, scientific, like nuts and bolts. Let's find the prints in the dirt where this UFO allegedly landed, according to witnesses, and let's study the amount of radiation. Some of them are that way. Most of them are a lot more dominated by a New Age spirituality scene, where people are there promoting just alternative.
Yeah, or how they might put it is that it seems like there's aliens visiting the Earth and people are having abduction experiences, and who are they, what do they want? Yeah, exploring those topics, just not from a Christian perspective necessarily.
Never at the time, yeah.
So what happened next in Roswell?
Well, my grand plan was to take this self-published book of mine and get it dropped into all the local tourist hotspots that I could, and then probably leave Roswell within a few months and go back to Nashville.
So you were kind of reticent in this. You said go in the book there, get out.
Well, I was a city boy. I grew up in Nashville. Roswell was a tiny town.
In the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere.
In the desert.
with nothing to do, it would turn out, I would find out, compared to someone who grew up in a larger city. So, yeah, I went there, but not really believing I'd be gone in 9 months or back in a year. And I did have a worship leader who was kind of at my sending away party, who attempted to strongly impress upon me when I told him, yeah, I'll probably be there 9 or 12 months and then come back. And he was just like, no, you won't. He's like, you're going to turn an entire town and subculture's point of view around. That is your goal, at least. That is your mission. And he's like, dude, that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time. And that was the closest word, so to speak, I got.
That's quite a word of encouragement and focus, their spiritual mission. So, what happened then after the UFO festival in Roswell?
Well, as it turned out, Bob, the worship leader, who told me that, was right. I immediately that week took a box, or at least a copy, of my book, Come Sail Away, to the UFO Museum, and I was willing to just give them multiple copies and leave it there on consignment, and they could pay me when it's sold.
Now, what is the UFO Museum?
Great question. In Roswell, New Mexico, they're at the corner of 2nd and Main, roughly the two highways that divide Roswell into north, south, east, and west. If you're driving through, which is really what most people are doing, just driving through. Roswell's a town of 40-something thousand.
So, dead center in the town, the biggest intersection.
In the crosshairs, definitely. There is a museum that memorializes the now famous and well-known 1947 Roswell incident, as it's called, or the UFO crash at Roswell, as people refer to it nowadays, where it is believed that in a thunderstorm in 1947, a UFO was an alien spacecraft from another planet with intelligent biological life forms was traveling across the skies of New Mexico, lightning struck, and at least one ship got downed.
It's not a very good propulsion system, is it?
Oh, no, sure. Yeah, you can travel 90 billion years across the universe, not hit a single asteroid or planet or comet dust, which would cause you to explode on impact. And then you have this mission of planet Earth, which you have studied and surveyed, and you're finally sending a, quote, manned vehicle there.
Lightning.
Yeah, and you forgot about that one. You hadn't figured out you shouldn't fly your ship through a lightning storm.
I guess so. So the story goes.
That is how the story goes. And there's a lot of eyewitness account and some sorts of tangible evidence.
Well, you've done a lot of research on that since then.
RoswellUFOcrash.com, in fact, yes.
So the museum, which, I mean, let's just get a little out of the interview thing. It's like, I've been there. It's like they got all the news stories up on the wall, and they got, like, kind of displays of dummy aliens, mannequins, and, UFO art kind of things, and lots of different UFO sightings from a lot of different places, news clippings and stuff like up on the walls. And
the heart of it is it focuses on the Roswell incident where a rancher came into town with debris, some funky metal that had unusual properties. And he went first to the sheriff, and then they called the military to say, hey, you had some test vehicle, and I know where it crashed. And they're like, no, we weren't doing anything that night. Take us out to where you think you found this crashed vehicle. And they brought back the debris. And the story has just grown there. There's many different versions of it, many different tellings of it. But Roswell itself became a focal point for people who wanted to investigate whether the story of an alien crash was real or not. The museum set up a nonprofit museum that had the displays and all the eyewitness accounts and affidavits for what people went through at the time, and in a way it's compelling. It's a nonprofit museum which is attached to a bookstore, a gift shop really you have to go through on your way out.
Yeah, and then they also have a library with a lot of books in there.
That you can sit and study and read for days. If you're a tourist who just wants to go to Roswell for a week and read up on it, you can check out their books if you live there.
Yeah, but
my goal was to...
When did it start? Do you know? When it opened?
I think around 1991, actually. Okay. It was there long before I was, for sure.
Okay. So, you wanted them to carry your book?
Yeah, so I went and met the nice lady who ran the gift shop. and offered her my book on consignment. And she immediately looked at the cover and was like, no, I can't carry that. I'm like, well, why not? You don't have to pay for it. It's free. Just if you can give me money later if it sells. And she said, we don't carry anything that has to do with religion. And actually, being a studier of this emerging UFO religions topic, I looked from where we were standing in the store. I looked around and I pointed to 3 different books that did deal with UFOs, aliens, and religions. And she said, well, we bought those a while back and we're not going to replace them when they're sold out. But that is our policy. We don't carry anything that has to do with religion. And I understood. Actually, they had taken a lot of negative flack from some of the Christians in the area who were just coming up there and almost picketing or boycotting the place and saying evil things about, this new age topic, UFOs, was not what the very conservative Christian community of Roswell really wanted to welcome or be known for. They'd already fought that battle 5 years at least before I got there. Their right to existence, actually, I would say, was challenged by someone, a few, very vocal minority that was in Roswell, and I don't know where they were by the time I got there.
And settled down and...
Apparently, and it had just become a norm. The UFO Museum was a tourist attraction. It made people stop in Roswell rather than just drive through. It made them eat at the restaurants. It made them rent a hotel room for a night or two just to check out this oddity, this UFO museum.
Yeah. So what happened next?
Well, I left from not being able to have my book carried at the UFO Museum because it dealt with religion, and I went to the largest Christian bookstore on Main Street thinking, well, sure, I'm just God's gift to Roswell. Finally, a Christian has come to explain this phenomena for us. And the owner of that looked at the cover and said, no, we do not carry anything that deals with UFOs here.
Okay, so you were pretty hyped up, excited, like you're going to bring this book there and the book will be in the town and people will come across the book and they'll get the truth about what this phenomenon is.
Get saved, maybe.
Yeah, so you're going to the UFO Museum and how old were you then?
31.
31?
31.
So you were pretty excited. And then the UFO Museum wouldn't take it. The Christian bookstore wouldn't take it.
I was madder at them, actually, than the UFO Museum. The UFO Museum, I understood. They had a reactionary policy to bad things that had happened to them. But the Christian bookstore, I felt, should have been more inclined on the side of fighting for truth, even if it was not popular. That's rather idealistic of me, I realize.
To read the book, maybe, before saying no.
That's exactly what I asked him to do. And he did read the book.
Oh, well,
and he told me he thought it was great, and he thought I was on to something. And if anybody came into the store specifically asking about Christian books on the UFO topic, he agreed to give them my website. And I left him the same little 1/4 page flyers with the book cover and the website that I passed out at the UFO festival. I wasn't just trying to sell my book there at the festival. I passed out hundreds, at least, flyers with the website URL where they could go to read it for free online. I didn't care if they bought my book. Never been in this to make money.
Yeah.
I just wanted the information out there. It's been free to read online since 1997 is when it started, and it still is.
It's a powerful read. It really is. It's great.
Thanks.
So, but that wasn't enough, huh?
I was stymied. My grand plan was to get my book
into the hands of tourists, right?
And set up reorder procedures so I could scoot myself back to Nashville one day soon. And I was stymied. I was between a rock and a hard place. I had no avenues for selling my book and was running out of money fast from what I had and from what the church had given me when I left. And got a job waiting tables in Roswell, New Mexico for 11 years. I worked there.
Awesome. I know you're a hard worker.
And after settling in, I got back to the internet, had to accept my lot in life, that my plan wasn't working. I mean, well, maybe God had something else in mind. Oh, fine.
A quote comes to mind. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah, that's really good. I was between a rock and a hard place. And after a couple months, very early, I'd say I got there at the 1st of July, maybe June 30th was my first day there. But by the end of August, if I recall, via the internet, I found other Christian websites dealing with the topic. Joe and Chris, of course.
Oh, so they had just pretty recently gotten something up then.
Mm-hmm. I think at some point in Nashville, they had both individually, separately. They lived, miles apart, but they had met by then. They had both sent me emails, but either too busy, didn't like their websites maybe or something, and just in all this rush to move to Roswell, I had to pack, I had to raise money and all that stuff. I didn't connect with them, but after I was in Roswell, I started looking at their websites, emailing them, got a little more, and I realized that, the problem I'm running into with all these Christian search engines that won't link to me, but the New Age ones will? Well, I made the site to look, it had a black background, for starters. And in 1997, if you had a Christian website, you did not use black backgrounds. That just wasn't done.
That was the underground.
Yes, the goth, the New Agers, the freaky people. Well, I made them,
Internet style.
I wanted them I wanted the New Agers to feel at home on my website. And it had a picture of an alien head. That's what's on the book cover and all that stuff. And the artwork was really fantastic. Thank you, Kim. Which far exceeded what you people expected of Christian works back then, honestly, whether it was music or art or anything. So the New Agey ones thought it was great. They wouldn't read it, but they would sure link to it because they thought it was cool. The Christian ones wouldn't read it, and they rejected it out of hand. But the problem was that I didn't think Joe and Chris's sites were doing much better with Christian audiences than mine was. So I got this brainchild to link up all three of them under one single .org, which was a very powerful term back then.
.org?
Alienresistance.org.
So actually only organizations were really using .org. It hadn't just gone to kind of a who cares free-for-all. It's like you were a real organization if you had a .org.
Yeah, and if you had any marketing plans at all or brains at all, you only bought .com back then because that's all people knew to type. So, but if you're a .org, that says something about you, and it did. So the original alienresistance.org was just a links hub that featured a paragraph on my website, what it was about, on Joe's website, what it was about, on Chris's website, what it was about, and it had a logo that I borrowed from this completely anonymous, still today, nobody knows who they are, free sticker campaign, V2, which if you sent them a self-addressed stamped envelope, they will send you back envelopes full of stickers that have this famous logo of an alien head, but with a red circle around it and a line going through. No aliens. What does it mean? What does it mean? And I borrowed their logo with permission and linked us all up on the website. So these three, honestly, I understood the position of the Christian webmasters even, and the average Christian internet surfer. If they came upon any of our three sites, they would have to be very cautious, and it would be highly suspect that you don't know if you're getting into one of those freaky Heaven's Gate things. Anybody that's a Christian that's dealing with UFOs and aliens is immediately suspect to be a kook.
Yeah. So you made a website that was, let me guess, a white background.
It did have a white background.
Yeah, okay.
At first. And then it had a white frame anyway, the poster, the logo. Then it had a black background with stars, and that's where the white text descriptions to our three websites were. So anyway.
Yeah, we're getting to a lot of web design details here.
Geek talk, yeah.
Geek talk.
Strategy, marketing. And shortly after that, I got the .org rolling, and it became a juggernaut of traffic. The internet was growing. Everybody was getting online now. And we were showing up for both Christian and non-Christian searches. People were linking to it.
So people would link to that one.
Yeah.
Enough Christians getting together is like, oh, okay, this seems all right.
Oh, yeah, you got three from different parts of the country, and they've got a .org. Well, by golly, I think I've found a reliable source of information now to study.
Okay, so what I know, the other people don't know, is that you opened up the storefront of Alien Resistance HQ. So I want to hear about, how'd you get the idea for that? How did that happen?
Necessity is the mother of invention. I felt rejected and stymied because no place was going to carry my book, and the idea popped in my head, I'll open my own store. And I will be the only location in Roswell, New Mexico offering biblical perspectives on UFOs and aliens. Chris gave me the 501c3 covering to go ahead with it. I opened a nonprofit downtown on 2nd and Main, that same intersection we talked about, near the UFO Museum.
Wow, so like ground zero.
Yeah. Yeah. And started ordering a few other books that were available, such as by Bill Alner, William Alner, Ron Rhodes. There were a few Christian books on UFOs out there by then, if you really looked hard for them.
David Allen Lewis.
David Allen Lewis, UFO End Time Delusion.
So there were a few. Right?
I'd never read them up to that point.
You never read them up to that point? So it's like you found them, but you hadn't heard of them before?
Not before I moved. I wrote my book from the perspective and the advice another Christian author gave me. You write your book before you read anybody else's. You write what God has given you. Don't copy what someone else is doing. So once I started opening a storefront, I mean, it was small, it was dingy, and I had to live in it to be able to afford to keep it open. It always operated at a loss.
So you were kind of working and paying to keep it open.
Yeah, I'd wait tables and open the store during the day. They eventually accommodated my schedule and very politely respected the fact that I was doing something else downtown. So they let me work mostly nights while I kept the store open during the day. Got some Starbucks coffee off the shelf at Albertsons, and started there were no Starbucks coffee locations in Roswell. That's how small and primitive this town was when I moved there. Okay,
back in 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
So you had your frappuccinos.
Yeah.
And
I had
coffee maker.
a coffee maker and an espresso machine that I bought at Walmart. And before you know it, I had a Christian bookstore and coffee house. And there was no high-speed internet in Roswell either then. Everything was still dial-up. And if you were...
Stone Age, man.
all of the hotels could not offer their travelers internet access. I happened to be, because I was watching for it, one of the first places in Roswell to finally have high-speed internet. And my friend Jody, who had decided he liked my website and came by to get to know me one day, and he loved coffee, he built computers and did web work for a living. So before long, I had an internet cafe where people could come and rent computer time, drink Starbucks, and if they were so inclined, they could leave with a book or one of many free flyers I would give them that had topical subjects addressed germane to the frequently asked questions and answers about UFOs, aliens, and the Bible.
Wow.
There wasn't a lot of demand for it, but the rationale was if people are going to come all the way to Roswell, New Mexico because they want the truth, someone needs to be there to give it to them.
And that was just revolutionary, really, in 2000.
If you say so.
Well, I think it was. I think it's awesome. I've seen the pictures. I mean, that looked like a fun little coffee house, whether for locals or for tourists. I mean, that was pretty happening.
Yeah, so I was that oddball, that Christian nut dealing with the UFO topic, who, if you took any time to look into what was going on, he claimed to be an alien abductee, and he was there to tell you about the prophesied end times coming alien invasion delusion.
Deception.
And give you a cup of coffee
and coffee.
Chat.
Internet.
Coffee with alien resistance.
Coffee with alien resistance.
That's what it was.
So did you get a lot of tourists?
Off and on throughout it was very seasonal. During the UFO festival and the summer, Roswell saw tons of tourists traveling through. Mm-hmm. Like, I'd say 75% of the people I met that would come into the shop over the years, 75% of them I encountered during 3 months of the year, the June, July, August. The other 9 months, I might see 20-25% of the people I talked to.
And 75 was locals, like...
No, hardly any locals at all came in because I was that UFO nut Christian guy down on Main Street that nobody wanted anything to do with. And yeah, I would mail out letters. I would invite pastors. The local church I started attending there, after 9 months of getting to know me as a human being, Christian, plugged into their church, they actually gave me $100 a month in support because even though they disagreed with some of the things, they saw it as a genuine evangelistic effort that was preaching Jesus to a very targeted subculture that they were glad to throw money at someone else to do so they wouldn't have to.
Well, they cared. They cared. More advanced in that reaching the outreach.
One of the elders, Boyd,
yeah.
worked off and on with me for several years. He was also interested and knowledgeable of the topic, and he was, at best, served as a liaison between myself and the church. So I rolled on. Like I said, the volume was very low, ultimately, though.
Well,
there's not much demand for biblical perspectives on UFOs when people come to Roswell. Roswell.
Well, you did have a lot of people coming in just really for internet cafe. I mean, that's what I was talking about, is that it was staying open through the internet cafe and coffee and just hanging out, not so much the UFO perspectives. I mean, those other 9 months of the year.
Yeah, and I still had to keep my job full-time to make it happen and to pay the rent and the utilities. But off and on, that was a good 5-6 years of my life, living in the shop and meeting the tourists, at least during the daytime.
5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Alien
Resistance. I mean,
yes.
People can find the pictures online.
Alien Resistance HQ.
Yeah. So you're doing Alien Resistance HQ, and then
Conferences.
That's another big thing that happened in Roswell. So
there was one a year in Roswell that the UFO Museum invited speakers who propped up their alien crash theory point of view to speak during the UFO festival.
July
4th weekend.
Every year.
Well, starting in 96, 97, 98. I was there for the fourth one, 99. But there were also UFO conferences and events being held around the country. And the more I looked on the internet, the more I found them. And when there was money available, and again, I worked for a living to support it, and I had a few friends and people that would give me some money from time to time, I would travel to... God bless them. The first one I went to was San Antonio, and it was a UFO conference, and I had my UFOs and the Bible book and free website booth, and right across from me, there was a representative of the Raelian religion with her books upon books and her high-tech TV video that showed you their special effects indoctrination to the Raelian religion, which is the largest UFO cult in the world. And she and I had an interesting weekend together.
I bet.
Skipping ahead, the next conference I went to was in Florida, where I met Joe and Chris in person. And we had a UFOs and the Bible, 3 of us there, answering people's questions, walking around, talking to people, blessing, praying. And it's not all antagonistic. A lot of times, this is a very common question. Once I started going to UFO conferences around the country, especially Christians would ask me, well, don't you find that's a very hostile environment to go into with the Bible? And I'd be like, that's what I thought too. But then after doing it a couple times, I realized that the people that are coming to these UFO conferences that are all over the country, they have questions.
They're looking for answers.
Some of them are alien abductees. Some of them want to know how to make it stop. Some of them want to know what is really happening. Others, it's just an intellectual curiosity. But what I found was, whatever their motivating factor is, they are willing to take several days out of their life. Maybe they're paid vacations, travel hundreds of miles, pay for hotel and conference registration fees and meals on the road, because something in them wants to know the truth about UFOs and aliens. So the same rationale of being in Roswell for the people that would go there, I started going around the country to other secular, New Age, scientific UFO conferences and just paying the $300 or whatever to rent a booth and sit there and give away tracts and flyers and have a growing collection of Christian material that was becoming available as the years progressed.
That's awesome.
And, we met Mike Heiser and a few other people via the internet and got the harebrained idea to have our own conference in Roswell with 6 Christian speakers. That first one was 2003.
And that was at Alien Resistance, right?
The first night of it was in the back. I mean, you could barely even call this a warehouse that I was operating out of. Dingy, dusty wood floor.
Oh, I've seen the front was a shop, but the back was like a big warehouse area.
Right.
Which was nice.
Yeah.
I guess to have that level of space.
So in 2003, 2004, we had the first alternative, basically, to what the UFO Museum was offering people. We actually had another venue in town that I would soon learn that the UFO Museum looked at it as competition and wasn't happy with what I was doing.
Well, so for like 5 or 6 years, how many years they had been doing their own kind of conference during the festival, and then here you come along as the first person doing an alternative event, a Christian event, and you're actually getting people in that do really know some things about ufology and alien abduction.
Right. And the first year it was all Christian speakers, 6 of us. The second year it was most of them again, I believe, a few more, but I also invited some of the more respectable and credible secular UFO researchers I'd met across the country over my few years of going to these conferences. And these were people that spoke of just things like government records, what the military knows, what Freedom of Information Act file searches have been able to turn up. The ones that I found I liked their information and their material.
It was very factual.
Right. It didn't have any New Age or spiritual bias to it, but you could definitely prove that there was something going on and some presence. Many of them would say E.T., and the common ground I found with many of them over the years was to simply agree that some non-human presence is engaging humanity on a regular basis. There is proof of it, there is evidence, and scads of it.
The government
records is covering it up to some degree, it seems. And the 2004 event had 7 Christian speakers and 7 non-Christian speakers. We had this huge 4-day event, Ancient of Days.
And that was groundbreaking. And so a lot of people who have heard of alien resistance, and they have heard of Ancient of Days, and the 2004 conference really was groundbreaking for the first time, really, I think. You had Christian speakers, non-Christian speakers, everybody's in ufology, everybody's coming together and talking about it and discussing it.
With a 3-hour panel discussion at the end of it.
Yeah, a lot of people have seen that, and a lot of it's up online, too, on YouTube and places. That went pretty viral out there, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So that was a great conference that reached a lot of people. So then you done 2, and then you started doing...
It continued for several years afterwards. I had varying themes and varying speakers, 2003, 2004, 2005, something different, 2006,
yeah.
And then another big one, 2007, was the 60th anniversary of the infamous 1947 Roswell incident, where the city of Roswell as an entity decided to pour like $150,000 in promotion, because the UFO festivals in the past, there was a big one or two, but there were a lot of lackluster ones where it didn't feel like there was 2,000 or 3,000 people that would show up over the weekend for it.
No, there probably were more than that. But
from a marketing perspective, the city wanted it to be big. So the mayor and the PR officer, the planning zoner, all the city employees kind of got drafted into the idea of the city, for the first time, sponsoring a UFO festival. And they, too, planned all kinds of events.
It's a big tourist attraction.
Yes.
Festival. And so how did that go down? You ended up organizing the conference for the city. You had planned your own event before you got involved with the city. Right?
Yeah, I had done it for 4 or 5 years. Every now and then something nice would be said about me. After 2006, a nice letter to the editor appeared in the newspaper. I caught wind through the Roswell Daily Record, the newspaper's story, that, 10 months from now, the city has decided they're going to promote the UFO festival and be involved. It's other than just the means of the UFO museum, and have something all across town with multiple events. And I was like, hey, well, I took a lecture that I had done recently. I took some of the nice things that had been said about me, and I mailed them to the city's mayor. I mailed them to the mayor's office just to introduce myself. I think people knew who I was, but I just wanted to tell them I'm a
speaker.
Yeah, I'm a speaker, and whatever you're doing, I've done these conferences, and to avail myself. I didn't hear back for a while, but I did get an email from the city's PR officer. She told me that her and someone else were going to one in the San Francisco area, basically to learn how UFO conferences are done and what do people expect when they go to them. And I knew that particular event they were going to was one of the more New Age ones that was in the entire country. And the speakers there, many of them were indoctrinating people into UFO cults. And I sent them a very detailed email. Here's what you're going to see at this event. And I listed about 5 different speakers. This guy is hilarious. He packs them in, but here's what he teaches and here's what he takes people to. This guy has been sued for falsifying his resume and his bio and for lying on television about his qualifications. Now, this guy sticks to government records. He's very good, because what they were doing, they were vetting speakers to see who they wanted to bring to Roswell, to invite to pay them to come.
Oh, so you sent them some helpful advice on this is who these people are, and this is, what you can expect from them. And
in a way, I wanted to warn them, because I knew that, because I personally, as a Christian, there was a certain element that I did not want to invite into Roswell to get popular. The UFO cults, basically, the New Agers. Even though they were big names that could draw crowds, I knew that from a PR officer's point of view, okay, all we need is crowds. But I wanted to warn them about what they were getting.
And you didn't want, someone that's fraudulent and been known for, making stuff up.
Or who was just going to be a UFO cult recruiter,
mm-hmm.
being given a stage in Roswell.
By the city
at
of
the
Roswell,
expense of the city.
Yeah.
And of course, the conservative Christians would be a PR nightmare after the event. So I gave them a heads up. That's all I'm saying. I wrote them a long email, a very detailed heads up about all of the speakers, many of the speakers that they were going. They went to the event, and then one day, a guy I'd never met before comes into where I work, orders an iced tea, and hands me a business card. Hi, I'm the city planner for the city of Roswell. I'm on the UFO Festival Committee. I'm here on behalf of the mayor, who wants to invite you to be the conference organizer for the city's speakers this year.
Wow.
I'm like, really?
Well, that worked out nice.
Yeah, apparently they witnessed that I was dead on. And what they realized, they were city employees, parks and rec, zoning. They weren't UFO experts mm-hmm. that were putting together this conference. They apparently recognized that I know the people in the field and I know who's good to bring in, and they entrusted me to organize the conference. So that was another large event over 4 days. Ultimately, it was 30 speakers. And I, of course, invited quite a few of my Christian speaker friends to come and present as well, to get some Christian theology and ministry in the mix.
Yeah, and that's where we met.
Where along came a paradox.
Yeah, and then there was, the next year, there was a CE4 conference, and then we did 2 conferences, and Christian Symposium on Aliens in 2009, and then War of the Worlds, The Invisible Battle in 2010.
Right, you came with your own ideas and research and theology, and different dimensions, stuff that I either had not thought of, or that we were in 100% agreement on in some areas, and even some stuff that I was doing wrong.
Yeah.
It did kind of help straighten us out, or straighten out the theology behind the whole website and the direction
sweet.
We were going.
That's sweet.
Well, thank you for coming.
Okay, so, and that almost brings us about up to the present. So it was a very compact, really, over 11 years of being in ministry doing alien resistance. And that's just an overview. That doesn't really get into all of the things in detail there.
Maybe a little more detail in some cases that I've given than people really want. But that, I guess, word that Bob gave me when I left, saying you're not going to be back in 9 or 12 months. What you're doing, you're going to change an entire subculture's view and turn the ship a different direction. And that takes time. I would have to say, well, as you know, the last year we were there, by the time I left, the city of Roswell was paying me as a presenter to give my view of the alien topic and specifically what really happened in Roswell in 1947.
And that is a lecture, if anyone hasn't seen that, it is on YouTube and they should watch it. Oh, they should watch it. I think that might very well be the correct answer as to what happens, something along those lines. And it's not the story of people hear about aliens.
Correct.
So let's not give too much away.
No,
but people
it's Roswell, UFOcrash.com. So really, by the time the city is paying me to do what everybody hated me for doing when I first came there, now still, overall, the churches in Roswell never got behind or embraced this.
Except for the one that was
supported, and a couple other individuals, but... Well,
that's not accurate, because there was a couple that pastors that did support it, so, you should... not forget that just because the first years there wasn't anyone. The last several years there were.
But out of over 100 churches in Roswell, we had the same 6 people coming to the conference, the same 6 Christian people that lived in Roswell coming to the 2010 conference that showed up for the 2003. We had the support of Christ Church.
You mean the 2009? But no, you mean the 2009. The same 6 people from the 2009.
Most of them were always coming. Jerry and
oh, you mean the people in Roswell? Well, anyway, but there was Lawrence. Pastors Lawrence and Margie of the Destiny Church in Roswell, who were supportive, and Pastor Calvary,
Jim Suttle,
who were supportive, and then Christ Church was supportive.
Jerry, Lonnie,
in
small ways. But what I mean is, the overall out of 100 churches in Roswell, we mailed them DVDs for free of the lectures we gave in 2010. And not to all 100 churches, but to those that we mailed that we thought might be most receptive, got 0 response.
I miss New Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
I really do.
We miss a lot of people there.
Yeah, if anyone's listening, we miss you.
Yeah.
We do.
It just boils down to, yes, okay, so I was ingrained and had a lot of favor from the city. The church hadn't changed, though, so I had a feeling, a tension between mission accomplished or mission impossible.
Yeah. So, okay, so the point was, for people who have never heard of alien resistance or Guy Malone, to give them kind of a background of like what you've done in ministry here, and it's and now there's some time in Orlando, Florida, and then now we're in Nashville, Tennessee. Alien Resistance is back to Nashville. Guy Malone's back to Nashville after 11 years of doing outreach to the UFO subculture in Roswell, New Mexico.
And the world didn't end, so it's time for us to get busy again.
No, well, didn't really think it would, though. But
just because the people that misinterpreted the Mayans got it wrong, I put a lot more faith in what the biblical prophecies reveal.
Yeah, and that's been a bigger focus the last few years.
More your area of specialty. Matthew 24 in the book of Revelation.
Yeah, so here's one thing, is like you have been involved in this since the late 90s, like 97, and I've heard other people say this, Joe, that really there has been maybe a heavier eschatological focus in the Christian ufology field. I don't know exactly where you distinguish even the Christian ufology field anymore from sort of the all sorts of Christian or Christian-esque eschatology focus on things, but would you say the eschatological focus has increased?
Definitely. It's become kind of a hodgepodge of murky, questionable,
all over the place,
debatable interpretations.
But really, how this began, I mean, the heart of this field, the heart of alien resistance, was evangelism and outreach to abductees and people who are interested in aliens and UFOs for whatever reason. Who
are experiencing torment and they just want help.
And that's what you went to Roswell for, was to give them those answers. The people that were in UFO cults, people that were abductees, and so you thought you had the answers to what this really was. And you wanted to share that with them, and the freedom in Christ that is available to people being an abductee.
Right, and the answers that I arrived in Roswell and left Roswell with are still available for free through all of our websites. I would say if anything's different, is that honestly, I still had a lot of questions. I might have thought I had the answer when I arrived, but there's one thing about this field is that the longer you're in it, the more questions you have. But now I'm at a point where I feel like even most of the questions that crop up as fringe or as secondary and third, I feel most of those are satisfactorily answered for me too. And it's less a field of research for me now as it is a matter of we have to take what we've got now. It's been refined. It's been corrected. Some of it's been changed. And I leave Roswell much more useful and knowledgeable than when I arrived.
Yeah.
We need to take what we have and get it to the church worldwide to equip them for ministry so that they also can go out and minister to the people in their area that have these same questions that you and I both had years ago and that people have all over the world still today. And here we are in Nashville.
And here we are in Nashville.
The buckle of the Bible Belt.
And, there are still a lot of people out there that have questions, and really the paranormal alien UFO topic has just gotten more popular. It's on TV more, it's in movies more, arguably. There's more and more people who are interested in the topic and getting maybe some incorrect answers on it. So awesome. So now people who have not heard of alien resistance should have some idea what it is.
Yeah, the coffee has done its work. I've rambled on quite a bit. I'll give you the final word, Paradox.
This is Alien Resistance signing off.